Welcome back, Augustonians. Happy Pride Month and a belated happy Juneteenth. If you are new to Lit Friday, my name is Jessica Lanay. I'm a poet, art writer, and the host and curator of Lit Friday. This virtual program from the August Wilson African American Cultural Center is held on the final Friday of each month and features conversations with Black authors and artists about their current work and its connection to the contemporary moment. Lit Friday is always live on the August Wilson African American Cultural Center Facebook and YouTube pages, so follow us there as well for updates. Tonight, I have the honor of speaking to Nicholas Goodley, my Cave Canem brother. We're going to talk about his debut full-length poetry collection, Black Swim, from Copper Canyon Press. But before he shares some work with us, let's synchronize our calendars. At 8 p.m. tonight, in person in Pittsburgh, come out to the August Wilson African American Cultural Center for the event Pride and Joy, hosted by Knox. On June 29th, we have our hip hop dance camp. Hip hop dance camp continues on July 13th. We also have Intermission, the Artful Happy Hour, returning on July 18th. For those fellow Black comic book fanatics, we have the forthcoming exhibition Collections in Black, a celebration of Black comic book culture, opening on July 25th. And Lit Friday returns with poet and performance artist Jerome Ellis on July 26th. Keep yourself up to date on our events and get yourself registered for those events ASAP at awaacc.org or on Instagram at August Wilson Cultural Center. To keep up with my forthcoming publications, exhibitions, and Lit Fridays, you can follow me on Instagram as well at @hanginthere_kitty. And now, without further ado, let me introduce Nicholas. Nicholas Goodley is the author of Black Swim from Copper Canyon Press 2022. This is the book, beautiful cover. They are a team member of the performing arts platform Fly on the Wall and poetry editor for Wussy Magazine. Nicholas was a finalist for the 2020 Jake Adam York Prize, runner-up for the 2019 Cave Canem Poetry Prize, and recipient of the 2017 Poetry Society of America Chapbook Fellowship, among other awards. Their work has appeared in Poetry Magazine, The New Yorker, Boston Review, Bomb, The Poetry Project, Lambda Literary, Narrative Magazine, and elsewhere. And also let me correct myself around pronouns. I think I've been saying he, I'm reading they, and so they are my Cave Canem sibling. We make mistakes in public, we make corrections in public, period. You can also follow Nicholas on Instagram at Nicholas Goodley. And now we get to hear beautiful poetry from Nicholas himself.
Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate you so much. Thank you for having me. I have a few poems for you. They're all from Black Swim. This first one is called My Black Spell. I breastfed one hunger after another. Fear me. I know the weight of playthings. The trampoline in the crawl space. Our family. Lost an older sister. I am fearless, subtle, phoenix older child. There was a time I could bite and crack into pink jawbreaker. Fuck my mouth up into red ants and explain away the blood in my gums. I've got muscle and am articulate, forged from the hurt parts of the ground. Domestic life was child's play, breaking one bone at a time, all fun and games, lives in my hands. I could do so much with miniatures. Throw the piano into the kitchen, attaboy, literally sexual, stripped the boys naked on the lawn. I wanted to be Michelangelo with Barbie's arched feet, or a Bratz that could bend at the knees. There is spit in my circumstance. They call me unstone. They call me unmusic. Baby, 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 voodooed alive. Seashell from familial waters. Healthy and unimaginably magical. I'm watching your back. Best I can, baby brother. Follow fish. Follow what runs to us. Home, licking with gumbo. I do not have words for all the things I desire. In the summer, my hair was braided. I am your brother, best I can. This next one is called R&B Facts. All mermaids are black and only hunt sailor men who talk that fuck noise. Egypt is the proud grandmother of Harlem, and she sits back in her chair with a switch in her hand. There is a brother and a sister somewhere just right for every child. If we didn't murder black boys, we would have voices that speak in song, and the music we'd make would birth storms. We all can walk on water as long as we never said no anti-black shit. If we lit a candle for every pain hurled towards trans folk, whole planets would be up in smoke. If we planted a tree for every word against women, the ground would lose sight of the sun. A dead child's name at the top of your lungs, like an earth-splitting lightning rod, has the power to remember them back. 1 in 3 black girls learns to swim by being chased away from the shallow end of a brown community pool. 2 out of 5 black families know death as that play cousin who sleeps over under comforters on the living room floor. There are black hills that only grow in the heat of the sun, made of thick, curling hair. The ghosts of black slaves are waiting in one big front room with good music till their whole families are free. Melanin, it's been proven, has endured more than any beam of steel. The Greek goddess of peaceful resistance has died in a long burning fire and is buried in a fruitless urn. Nina Simone was born in the 15th century. Her crib was the bottom of a full boat. The bigger the hoops, the braver the body. Armpit hair is permanently sexy. Acrylic nails start fires in a heavy heart. Melanin bleeds a softness wetter than silk. No one survives Etta James. The strongest homes are built on onyx brick, on muscle, covered in charcoal skin. Melanin is a blessing, gold melting in our hands. Melanin is light on every surface of the day. There is no color on earth that is not some child's favorite. If every human stood shoulder to shoulder, we would make an iron castle with beating veins between the walls. All of us lying head to head is a river feeding an ocean too black to swim. This next one's called Hypersigil. I claim myself apparition in pieces, overgrown and wicked, all shade and stones. I am ghost making, the soul floats, sad wood in crowded sea, the weight of a forest. Lord, we heard you in our own way. There is no meaning in all these knowledges. Shrinking combustible light, the waves kiss the shore, softly over and softly over. The night drinks it in, the viewer and the view, enough to let angels, one night after the other. I was born your tongue, meant for divining. I've done every person blood. I used to want big wings, this affectionate voice, this cold underground. Black ice says only the kindest things. I don't know how to mourn that way, how to sing it if it isn't real. Tell me how I deserve it, won't nobody else. Where have I placed your magnificent heart? The baby's tears are quieting. What shall I do? Your answer. Softly over and softly over. And one more. This one's called First Poem. I had ever written was about green bug because I painted one at school, or the painting came later to go with the poem, or the poem was about gold and was printed in rainbow letters, and the painting had a rainbow in it. The picture was a blue watering bucket, a butterfly, an orange and pink sunset made of vertical stripes, and a purple rainbow, and a rose or tulip. And the poem had a refrain. It was a song for class, or I wrote it for my dance teacher because she thought I was a poet, and I read it to the class, or just to her. She said, beautiful, or thank you, and the painting and poem are in a frame together now, and it matters that where it all started was a good garden.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. I was hoping, like, I have like poems marked because I want to try to start doing this thing where at the end I like have a special request for like a poem to be read. And you
Nice.
hit one on the head. It's R&B facts.
Oh
I
yeah,
love that poem. It's like the best ever.
Thank
And
you.
it's like I wrote this question while I finished reading that poem, like kind of sitting with it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like the imagistic is really like one of the pistons
Mm-hmm.
that is really driving you. And sometimes in a lot of imagistic poetry, either consciously or unconsciously, the narrative gets buried. So it takes a particular reader that's dedicated to poetry in a particular way to kind of go between, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you still have this deeply associative, visually explicit work, but you don't abandon a narrative for the reader to hold on to. What are the strategies that you use in your writing to maintain that balance without, in some ways, capitulating to having to explain?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think this is a good example of one of a kind of strategy poem. I went in with the conceit of obviously like creating these facts that aren't facts. Sometimes a conceit, some of them are like, I was like, I want to make myself laugh, or I use a joke structure. And the reason poetry and jokes share the same structure because every line has to build or escalate. You can't stay at the same place. So you need to have some kind of way of upping the stakes from one movement to the next. It's the same thing in comedy. You can't stay still. You have to keep the reader's ear stimulated. So if not necessarily to make myself laugh, I want to like, how do I keep being more audacious, or like, how do I keep risking the image? And the conceit of this one of just like these putting Black figures and Black history in this jumbled alternate universe was a strong enough conceit that it held together. And if you got a good, like, if you got some good reins, like, go for it. So I just looked out on a concept that could hold something like that together.
And since this is the example that we're talking about, why R&B as opposed to any other kind of like Black music form that, you know, we love and heavily engage in, and so some respects kind of draw our own narratives by as individuals?
Okay, so it's it's a dumb reason. Well, I've never wanted this question of why R&B Facts is called R&B Facts, but the reason is because, uh, like, you know how like Trump had alternative facts, and I always thought like alternative R&B, so my version was R&B, and because I was frustrated with the idea of how easy it is to just, if you say something, it becomes real. So it was this like a blanket title that I just put on at the time, and it's been rolling with me all these years. But it's a Black form as opposed to I don't know. It's a distinct Black kind of association.
And that also, it's like in a lot of the work in Black Swim, there's this very thin, porous like membrane between ecstasy and violence.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that is in the work that you shared with us. Um, there are many moments like in the to you who fit the description series where
Mm-hmm.
you're very much playing with this very sensitive um, place where consensual violence
Mm-hmm.
can be a part of ecstasy,
Yeah.
but how this is a very fraught place, especially when you are Black. And as you say in one of your poems, like, I don't know the names for all the things that I desire. And
Mm-hmm.
your ability to explore that is somewhat clipped by danger, right? A
Yeah.
danger that really has nothing to do with you. Could you say more about what this relationship is for you and how it's also another like set of, it's like another force in the book itself, and how does that relate to Black Swim as like a
Mm-hmm.
concept?
Yeah, and that series in the middle, like to stick with that one, it was me asking questions about Black, and I think like Black male body intimacies, almost like how can you be close with another person when both of you are have so many reasons not to let your guard down, um, and like both of you could be a danger to each other because you know your history, like we can, who knows what happens when we both allow ourselves to be close to each other. um, it's a scary thing, and what's so beautiful about like the human experience is in all that risk there could be such great reward or such
Mhm.
pain and devastation. um, I just think that's like such a beautiful concept and a beautiful thing to like stick with. um, I think like I like the um, you could say liminal space. I think that word gets overused, but the space in between two poles. So like I like the idea of, I mean, devil angelic. I like the idea
No,
of,
I was like noticing the horns kind of coming up like from under
yeah,
the shirt, like the angelic underneath it. Yeah.
like put both of them together and see what happens, because both are true. uh, I like the idea like how far can you hold two separate truths, and acknowledge that for yourself, and draw power from both of those things. So like I know the version of me that the energy resonates like up here. I love that version. I also know that there's a version of me that does not have as high a frequency. And what if we could draw on that whole spectrum, and then that's who you are as an individual? I think that's how like sometimes um, some of this book feels like prayer like, or reaching up, and then some parts are reaching down, um, and letting both exist, um, and playing in that space, not necessarily like putting a name to it, not necessarily putting that name on the desire, but like it's like if two cells are two electrons are close to each other, and the static that happens in between when they don't necessarily touch, that's the world I'm interested in.
The catalytic,
The catalytic, yeah.
the reaction, that quick
Yeah.
that quick space.
Yeah.
So it's also like just listening to you talk about, you know, the liminal spaces, right?
Hmm.
And also how that relates to this idea of third spaces that's also being kind of, you know, like bashed around in an effort to kind of get out of it. I kept thinking about like structure and approach, and I kept thinking about how one builds an altar, especially if you're
Yes.
from like the Black American South,
Mm-hmm.
and you are inherently have this creativity because you don't always have everything at your disposal. And so if
Mm-hmm.
you're making an altar or you're doing some work, you pick
Mm-hmm.
up things that you find, you go for a walk and you pick up things off the ground, maybe an old piece of jewelry or maybe like like a bone of something, you're not quite sure what it is. And it just felt like this constant building that you were talking about as well. There's also
Mm-hmm.
a lot of South here. There's a lot of Atlanta here. There's a
Yes.
lot of wordplay from
Yeah.
like Atlanta as like a space with an immense amount of musical history that you're playing with. And so I wanted to know how that geography grounds you. What does Atlanta mean in terms of this Black swim? And what is the role of, I don't want to say magic because I think that that's a word that substitutes for like the inherent transubstantiative experience of Blackness itself, right? It's
Yeah.
not magic, it's very real.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just want to know about like all of those things, this gift you have. So it's like this book is you having built an altar out of like a methodology that's inherently of the space that we share as home.
Yeah. 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 Thank you for that. I think, yeah, like I'm bringing my parents are like they're both born and from Louisiana, like bringing that like Creole flavor to there's gumbo, there's uh like we were talking about Atlanta and Outcast earlier, like all that
Mm,
kind of richness. Um it's a type of bringing your whole self. You could feel when someone like brings their whole I think I wanted this book, you don't want your book to be uh in a cheesy way. It's this book is not me, but I feel like I put uh a lot of who I am in it. So like I can I have my whole queer world I can bring into this. I have my whole Blackness I can bring into this. I have my upbringing in a I went to like Catholic school from like kindergarten to 12th grade, so I have all that language and knowledge. Uh I I think like if you allow yourself to view your past as like an ever-growing toolbox, and if you can look upon it without judgment and look at these as like raw pieces to again draw power from, uh that's how you can start to freely wield these images and um, textures and ways of moving about language. I also think I get excited when I think that words themselves are already like charged objects. They have if we look at them as like magic objects, or if we look at them like to me, the thing that poetry and like prayer has in common is the value of the poem is more than the sum of its parts. Uh,
mhm.
that if this arrangement of it's like spell casting, like this arrangement of letters for some reason sparks a life of its own. And so to acknowledge that, you also I don't know, you there's so much it gets exciting to play. Um, and I also feel like I can that also makes me feel like I can separate um, the pieces a little bit more from myself. So I don't feel like I'm at stake with the language necessarily, but I'm making something that I'm going to put out in the world to have its own life. And that's very freeing. I don't like to feel like, yeah, like the poem is me. It's its own thing.
No,
Um,
I was hearing you think about it. Like while I was reading through the book, I went and I reread parts of Zora Neale Hurston's Sanctified Church,
mhm.
because she has that diagram in the back of that book where she's trying to break down Southeastern, like Black English and colloquialism.
Yeah.
And it just reminded me that so much of our creative process has to do with the question of not how it's properly used, but what is it supposed to do?
Yes.
And based on what we learn of what is this supposed to do in the world as far as its effect, then we start to break and play, if we're poets, or like babalaos or like iochas, we start to
Mm-hmm.
break and play with the words in order to have an effect. And that's what got me onto this thought about like thinking about the Hoodooistic as like a poetry method, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
this is how you get to the word. Like even if it's just you're like, well, what is that supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
Does it have to be there? Not always.
And it's inherently a failure. Like Jessica Lanay, those words will never fully encapsulate who you are. Like there's more there. And so if you start out knowing that like the poem I thought I was gonna write when I sat down is not, like, I won't hit that. Let's see what else happens. Um, I also think that's like queerness in a way, like I could talk about, you know what I mean? Like that's trying to making do, or like trying to attain something that is unattainable, or trying to um, achieve a perfection that is imperfect. Um,
I
so
mean,
I.
I think for me, in terms of like queerness, being a queer Black they myself, right? Like
Mhm.
thinking about all of my contact with gender growing up was incredibly like situational, like as a kid,
Mhm.
And so there's a way that you kind of have to take what resonates
Yeah.
from the hard structures that other people follow and be
Yeah.
creative with that and then keep going. And especially in the Black queer experience, the self is treated like an altar space that can hold as much joy, ecstasy, pleasure as grief. Because if you don't make space for all of that to kind of live together, then you've missed the point
Yeah.
of
I
like
like.
how self belongs to your experiences with others and how you need others. And sometimes the structures that we follow impede our access to like love and self.
Yeah, like we only know ourselves through relational, like as relational beings. We're like the parts of our identity we say yes or no to, and can like make choices with between what we see and what we want to be a part of and not want to be a part of. But we can't really exist um without without others, without the awareness of others, really.
Right. And also like the openness of others, right? Like
Hmm.
in order for you to live openly, the people around you also have to have like this like openness of vulnerability, like openness of heart, for as corny as that sounds.
Yeah.
Um when I read the title of Black Swim, what I think about is like segregated public pools.
Hmm.
Um and this kind of historic notion that there was a moment in American history where there was a time for Black people to swim, and if the same pool was allowed in some spaces and then drained and cleaned and then refilled for other people, um non-Black people to swim in. And so is that what the title's related to? I want to know more about the title, because I also, reading the poems and looking at the image on the front, it also seems like a reference to flying. It's such an
Mm.
effective title in terms of getting the reader to think carefully about what they're entering into in terms of like a world.
Yeah. I think um I definitely like the idea of what you're talking about, that historic, like there was a time that Black people could be segregated pools, or that the idea of like congregating Black bodies in water was really a beautiful idea to me. I also like the defiance of people think like Black people can't swim. To me, I was like, it's nice to see like it has a sense of defiance that way. I also like the idea of um, when you say like kind of diving into a world, or being so
Like,
submerged that it's all dark around you, until it's not even an up or down anymore.
mm-hmm.
A complete kind of consumption. Uh, and I think water's an important motif for me. It's going to keep showing up. I don't think I'm a Scorpio water type. Like,
No, you have a poem in here, Scorpio
oh, yeah.
Pisces. It's this one.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
watered down. So like, water is really important to me. And I like the thud of Black Swim as opposed to like Black Water. I wanted a title that didn't have that wasn't too that had some weight to it, gravity wise, not necessarily like concept wise, you know.
Like resting into as a form of like positive sinking, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's great.
Like,
Positive thinking. And I think like also it feels like it doesn't feel like drowning ever.
right. There's
That's I
also
don't know
that spiritual aspect there, right? Like, because
Mhm.
we have this imaginary of song.
Yes.
We have um um I'm forgetting the word. No, but the concept that there is a kingdom underwater of guild Black people who have evolved, who jumped from slave ships, right?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
And having
Mhm.
this be a constant thought process of like survival, a positive sinking ability to like, transform oneself, right, in order to survive, but also just live. But also like it's like the boundary between life and death in Black Swim is such a screen door. It's
Mhm.
just like
Yeah.
the wind keeps banging it. It's almost like it's inconsequential. Like it's like death,
Yeah.
you're dead, you're alive. Like if you're Black, do you ever really go and like you don't leave the memories or the hearts of who love you, of your community. Doesn't matter who did or didn't know you. You always leave a mark. We always regard the lives we remember as a kind of art, like a live art that has happened that we must do honor to.
Yeah.
And there are so many existences here without the physical bodies. And
Mhm.
this is like um, I mean, obviously you can tell by how I'm talking about it, how much I loved it and found a safe place for me right there. And that's the strength of how it was for me as one of your readers for a long time. But there are like, yeah, it's about that like transmutation I was talking about. And so I wanted you to like, how does this, you know, constant transmutation like a challenge anti-Blackness, or is that the point of all? Like a few of the questions that arose at the end of the book is like, I think that sometimes white audiences like to engage Black work because so much of it makes death just a matter of like place and circumstance and
Yeah.
ceremony
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than an actual thing that happens to us, and that
Yeah.
assuages some kind of guilt for them, like, oh, they're
Mhm.
living somewhere, blah blah, you know, and they enjoy watching like that as a kind
Yeah.
of
Mhm.
self-soothing. But it
Mhm.
is powerful. What you've done is powerful in terms of like eschewing a constant association with death. That's something that we fought always before we got here and after we got here. So I just wanted you to say more about like this relationship because it's just so rich and it's so
Yeah.
effective and beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean that thinking about the word community is important because a lot of especially when this I lived in Atlanta like when this book was like first coming out, and I really like wanted to emphasize how important my community and being around my like queer community and my Black community. I was so supported creatively all my life, um, and I was allowed to be myself so much. So I felt like I owed so much to. I mean, there's beautiful stories from about my grandparents supporting me, my parents. Uh, I like have so many people who are in here in one way or another, and that extends beyond like if they're living or dead. And I feel like I don't know if it's almost a type of divination. I mean, I guess I talk about divination, but like
Mhm.
your story starts long before we are here. Um, I sense that, and I also feel like you can pull from the lives of the past, like laterally. It doesn't necessarily have to be a family tree. I think like uh, there's so many ways to um, be in conversation with people beyond living at the same time and talking to each other.
Beyond language, yeah.
Yes, I think about like who's in this book. Like one of the editing versions, or like one of the eyes I read it with was like, who am I mentioning? Who am I invoking? And being intentional about that. Like if there was a list of just the names, does that list feel like it's like connected to my heart? And will that resonate? Because I think, yeah, like histories are not, there's more to history than like a family tree. It goes way beyond that. It's where the spirit connects. And investigating that, it's not ignoring who's living or dead, but it's like making an effort to, maybe it just takes a little bit more effort to reach that place on a heart level. So yeah, I think about it. I think about that kind of who's in here, and like who do I want to share with my audience. So I'm glad you felt them. It sounds like that's
No,
huge.
I think that listening is scary and listening is like hard, you know?
Mhm.
I think listening sometimes for people may feel very much like being awoken by a strange sound in the middle of the night when you're home alone.
Yeah, yeah,
And you're scared to listen because if you listen deeply enough, you know you have to act. You
yeah.
have to go look, you have to do something, and that requires being responsible. And I think so much of divination and what you offer like here
Mhm.
is about listening. Like you're listening to someone, you're listening to someone's actions, to people's lives, and how those things resonate and connect with you as an artist. And listening moves the air. Like what you say moves the air. It has a
Yeah.
great effect no matter how much we can waste our words. Um, but yeah, like I think that there's a lot of listening here.
And it is uncomfortable to um sit with some of those questions, or like putting yourself in the space to explore some of those ideas. Like there's a poem about like a sister who passed away before I was like even born, and being like, how does my mother um I mean, it affects how she celebrates me being the next person. There's a celebration of life there, but like, does she think about or mourn this other person? Is her spirit still around? Or I have poems about people who've like gone on, friends in the artist community, and I was like, I want to preserve them. I want the world, everyone I encounter, everyone who touches this book, I want them to like know their names for a second. Like I want that to happen. How can I make that happen? And I think sometimes that when I say uncomfortable, there's also a fear of like, am I going to honor these people the correct way, or if I'm going to um, do them justice or something like that. I think uh, I think I had to like be okay with being honest, and trust that I have a good heart about it, and like really like spend time like preparing myself and being like knowing that I have good intentions with whatever that project is. That's a huge deal because I've never done a poem about someone angry, or I mean, some people can, and like those great poems exist, but I would have trouble um, figuring out how to share something if it had a ill intention or something behind it. So I just like trust good intentions will be like received, and like just keep softening, softening, softening.
Mhm, mhm. And so in your bio, there's fly on the wall,
Hmm.
and you are you move the air. That is one of your practices.
It
You
is.
are a dancer,
Yes.
and you are attentive to dance. I think one of the first things you ever said to me at Cave Canem was you came up to me and you were like, I was dancing, and you were like underrated twerker,
Yeah.
and I was like, I
That sounds like me.
immediately stood up and I was like, no, don't draw attention to me.
Yeah, yeah. I think you were just like off to the side, going off.
No, I was
I
dancing with
see you.
I was dancing for Essence,
Yeah.
a mutual friend of ours.
Yeah.
And I want to know what other practices inform your writing craft. Tell us about Fly on the Wall.
Yeah.
For instance, what does dance or Vogue teach you about writing and vice versa?
Yeah. I think because I started out as a dancer, like I was like dancing in kindergarten. I was like dancing professionally in like late high school. Um, I think something about it taught me that like the work has to come from the inside out, as opposed to the type of dance I enjoy is like instead of like necessarily trying to achieve a shape or trying to arrive at a certain line, I'm more interested in like how did we get there? Like what is all the parts that were activated? How does it feel to be in that pose rather than just to achieve that pose? So that was the physical practice I was engaged with. So when I wrote, I was like, I'm not looking for the pretty line. How does it feel to like hear those words in a sequence? Or how does it feel when I read that back? What happens inside the body? Um, and I think if we look at, I think when people watch dance, um, it's like I don't know if it's an empathy response or like it moves you. Like when we see someone suffering, we feel suffering. It's such a, I think it's the most tangible way to achieve that. If we see someone fly, we feel lighter. We feel like if we see someone celebrating, watching someone else's body perform, um, or like be present raises our awareness as well. So being conscious of how art uh, emanates from like one body to the next. I think I bring that over to my poetry, and I also it just feels good to move because again, these this word practice is like a series of failures, or like trying to articulate the inarticulate. I'm doing it right now. The inarticulatable. How's that?
Yeah, the
Okay,
unspeakable, the
sure.
unspeakable.
The unspeakable. That's right. So the physical body, I mean, when we dance, we're saying so many things, or like we're not even trying to put the word to it. Like we're just like feeling it all at once and like sweating it out. And it's a practice that um, involves the whole body. I mean, it's so beautiful that like an emotion can exhaust you when you dance. Like that's such a cool. Nothing else can do that. Um, so I
Or
think
when you
about that
go out
often.
dancing on the weekend, right? And then your knees
Oh
are sore
yes,
the next morning and you can barely make it across the house, but that's a great gratification. Like it's the
yes,
evidence of you having like really like squeezed it out of yourself, you know?
yeah, literally dripping. Yeah, that's
Exactly. But I
yeah.
also wonder how this relates to training yourself because we have like many poets
Mhm.
in our legacy that always talk about training. Terrence
Yes.
Hay talks about training like a sport. Kevin Young talks about like training your thought. And
Mhm.
I know that your craft as a dancer involves a lot of training. Is there a relationship between the way you train to move and the way that you train to write? Like, do you learn something from one craft or the other about how to kind of make more interior or more subconscious the gesture that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, that was hard, and when I first started, like, taking writing seriously and, like, stopped dancing because dancing, you could show up to a studio every day, or you can work until, like, you can't walk. Like, you can track how much you push yourself. How do you do that in writing? I remember I was really frustrated because I was like, "I don't know if I'm showing up the correct way every day." And I still
Yeah.
don't know if like I know that I mean, all of us are probably thinking, like, we could be reading more, we could be actually, you're somebody I like, um, your knowledge and the way you can think laterally and, like, bring so many references to the table and think so flexibly, uh, you're somebody I always, like I'm like, "I would love to think like Jessica one day and, like, have so much" that would say, like, community and, like, having other models of thought. I'm sure you have people that you look up to and are like, "How do they think like that? Like, how do they do all this?" But maybe we're not supposed to judge ourselves. Mm. Like, maybe we should just, like, let ourselves, be where we're at. I think maybe training is, like, deepening our emotional depth, like, being conscious of our interpersonal relationships, or, um, be observant, uh, be observant as an artist. I do think I mean, there are things like we talked about, like, you can practice forms, you can give yourself prompts. I do think it's easier to keep the ball rolling than it is to
Get it
restart.
started.
And luckily I've been in a position of like keeping the ball rolling a little bit. But I think the less judgment, the easier it is to like proceed as an artist. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think there's also, we were kind of touching upon this, you know, if you're an artist, especially in this moment, politically,
Mm-hmm.
technologically, on so many levels, the playing fields and what will be allowed to exist and where it will be allowed to exist and how you will be regarded or treated for it, those tectonic plates are breaking and shifting, and
Yes.
it always feels like you're kind of walking on something floating, like you're kind of going from some kind of gladiatorial thing that you have to do. And we were talking about social media and how hard it
Mm-hmm.
is to kind of, if you're not, if you're an introvert, or if you are an introvert in terms of social media and you're an artist, you're like, well, how do I introduce myself or my work to the world when everything I do is really, really craft based, but everything that's required for people to have contact with my work, I hate.
Mm-hmm.
Right? All of those systems you hate. Like, how do
Yeah.
you navigate that as an interdisciplinary artist?
Yeah.
It's hard for me to figure out, especially, but like, you know, like, what would you say to a young person that's like, I don't like social media, I don't like, you know, posting, you know, what is it, like, hard opinions that aren't really hard opinions just to
Yeah.
provoke people to follow me online, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you navigate this, because you have a YouTube channel,
Yeah.
and you're on Instagram, and
Mm-hmm.
you do a lot of work in the writing community. You're an editor, you're a mentor, you're a writer, you're a dancer. Like, how do you deal with that stress of trying to give more people access to what you do?
Yeah. Um, for me, and I do think there's a time where like I'm right now I just love the process of like the actual artistic process. You do have to actively switch and be like, okay, if I want to um, have more people see my work, or I want to like reach out further, I need to make an active turn towards that. And you do have to, you can't say, I'm not going to do any of it, or people should just find me. Unfortunately, that's not a real reality anymore. And it doesn't
Uh-huh.
mean that you're a sellout to do it. Like, you just have to think, what version of this resonates with me? Um,
Mm.
for me, like I had started, yeah, like the YouTube channel. I even started like interviewing other artists and doing like a little doodle so that the video is like showing me drawing and I'm just having a conversation with an artist uh, about like their practice. That because I like talking about different art forms. I like making deep connections with one-on-one artists. So that's something, even if not many people see it, it feels like I'm still being a good like literary citizen, or I'm still like participating in a way that I enjoy. Um, and I think I can even like I should probably be more consistent with that when I have time. But it's a practice I can like stand behind. It doesn't give me the ick. It doesn't make me like. I also like I like taking pictures in cool clothes. I think that's fun. So I might I like found things uh, that I enjoy. Uh, so there's so many versions and so many models. You can give a tour of your desk that day. If you Some people post like drafts. Some people I read some
Mm.
poems sometimes. I just put on an outfit and read a poem just because I was like, I haven't touched the world in a minute. Let me remind him who I am through art. For me, that's always like I was like, I just want my art out there. That's what feels most important to me, not me. I want my art out there. Some people love having conversations online. Just find what works for you, and also just keep doing. But you probably should be doing more art than you are posting about your art.
So could you say a little bit more? We're like, we can go over a tad because,
Mhm,
you know, we get signed on like 2 or 3 minutes late, but I want you to say more about this idea of the literary citizen. Teach me
mhm.
about that real quick.
Yes. Um, and it's something I overheard at like an AWP conference. So you can keep submitting your work for publication, but that's not necessarily like engaging as much as you can. There are things like you can write reviews for books that you love. So many places are looking for reviews of books. There's like a shortage of reviews right now. So if you're like a writer, just ask your favorite writer, like, do you want a review of your book? Or like, can I submit a review? No one's gonna say no. Do a good job of like carefully writing a prose piece. Like what that's great fun. Try that. I edit on a few journals, especially through my life. I've been involved in a few. But
You used to be with Southeast, right?
Southeast
And now
Review.
you're with Wussy Magazine, yeah.
I was
You're
with
doing something at
Rhino.
Kenyon Review, you said?
Yes, I'll be up there to teach. But I worked with Rhino. I've done stuff with Poetry Magazine, all kinds of things. But when you're on those, not only are you participating with other editors and getting a sense of what editors are looking for, which is so huge, because now I'll know with my poems on the first line, I was like, oh, this will never get, like, it's not ready. This won't pass. Like, let's go back. You get a sense of what people are looking for, and you also are making connections with editors. Those editor meetings where you get to talk about the work, it's always really exciting. And it's just reading poems. So find ways to participate with other people, and even if it's volunteering, you don't have to get paid for everything. But making those connections and like are ways that you could build relationships without doing something you don't want to do. There's always versions, um, and especially when your book comes out, then you'd want people to like care about it. You'd want people to share it. So it's important to do.
Another thing, the braiding, this intricate braid of Black swim that you created for us is, you're able to name the queer origins of the concept of radical intimacy through imagery, while also leaving your poetry open enough that other people can find their place in radical intimacy, whether or
Yeah.
not they feel involved in a queer culture, lifestyle, or identity. And what writing mechanics help you leave that door open? How do you approach your exegesis, your unfurling of radical intimacy, anchoring it where it started while also leaving it available to others? Because that's a really hard line to toe in a contemporary moment that's so anti-LGBTQIA2+, so anti-trans, so deathly for people that are trying to live radically intimate lives, even if they do consider themselves to be cis heterosexual.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And I think I know exactly what you're talking about. Like even like the queerest poems in here, there's still something for like heteronormative people to take things away from. And so if I'm trying to communicate, I feel like a lot of what I'm doing in Black Swim is like if people ask what I write about, I was like, I write about feelings. I write about like so if I'm writing about feelings, I use sensation to do that. So that's image, that's sound, that's textures, tastes. If I'm invoking that whole palette, that's going to be activated whether you understand what's happening or you don't. Like you could eat a piece of cake without knowing the ingredients and be like, I like that. Don't know what that is, but that's something happened.
I love that example.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Now, if it's while you're chewing it, I'm telling you what you're eating, then you're gonna like pick out certain notes, and I'm dictating the experience. But if I just let you have it, it's gonna do what it does. And if you know the ingredients, then this metaphor is really helping. If you know the ingredients and they hit, you're like, ooh, that lemon, that's great. I love that. So yeah, it's just offering without dictating, and again, that trust that the reader will feel. Because again, I'm starting with the I think the dance thing helps because we all have a body at least. So if nothing else, I'm trying to invoke feeling within a body, and that sometimes that's enough instead of like going any deeper.
Yeah. And so I have a request, a special request. We'll end with that.
Okay.
But what's of great interest to me, as I said before, as like an admirer of your work and a student of your patience with your own writing, what kind of writing do you wish to see more of in the world right now? Because you're also an editor. So what do you want to see come across your desk?
I'll say like, I want to see more risks being taken. I also want to see it. That patience word is nice. Risk taking and rigor at the same time, like ambitious and disciplined. Those kind of combinations where like making really big choices and then like showing so much control within that. I'm also excited for, I think we're in a really unique moment where we're seeing a lot of hybrid work, and I love work that you're like, let's just not label this, and this is just really neat writing. Whatever this is, it is exciting. I love that. So that's something I'm always like peeping.
Coker is a good teacher for that.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Coker is a perfect teacher of that. And then I have a request.
Okay, what you got?
It's one of my favorite songs on the album. I want to hear "Don't Look That Witch in the Eye."
Okay, let's see. Yeah. Do you know what page that's on?
Yeah,
oh,
I want to tell you. 6. Oh, 6.
Gotcha. All right, let's see. Don't look that witch in the eye. Mama warned us about that woman. The whole neighborhood saw she stayed lonely as an apple core, as if she hoarded brokenness, and it was contagious. I took the stray mutt from underneath her shotgun. I shouldn't have done that. A bell tolls in a nearby cathedral. I keep a straight pen a day. Forgive people easy. I am the mouth that doesn't go willingly. I am the aftertaste of rejection. There is not enough healing in the world to erase, to hold what cannot be pieced together. Build a church out of weather, but the sound is already out. I was the first to seek a way to abandon me. These days I watch the world go by and do not breathe life into it. I am not expected to be anywhere. I can't love someone cunning into loving me. This is stonework. My porch, a weapon. Its doors, wires and glass. Windows, unstained with cobweb and lead. I seek out my own men, ruthless, ones without foresight, and I become the unbearable woman.
Love, 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 love. Is there anything about that poem you want to share with us before we close?
I mean, my grandma I was like playing in the front of, in Louisiana, across the street. She was like, "Don't look that woman in the eye. She's a witch." I was like, "If you see her sitting on the porch, don't look at her." And I was like, "What?" And so it always like stuck with me. And so it became a poem down the line. But yeah, grandma gave me that.
I love it. Nicholas, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your work, for talking about the creative process of Black Swim. It's such a gift. Everybody, if you haven't read it yet, it's worth reading, 3 times in one sitting. Like the movie you want to watch over and over again. I love it. Come back July 26th. We have the poet and performance artist Jerome Ellis with us, and it's also going to be a great pleasure. Thanks so much, Nicholas. Good night, everyone. Have great weekends. Be safe.